Now let's turn from upheavals in the Earth's crust to upheavals in the social crust that has long entrapped the Arab street. The Arab lower classes are rising up against military dictators, absolute monarchs and autocratic presidents, most, but not all, allied to Washington. This unlovely bunch share one true love, neoliberalism. World capitalism turned to neoliberalism 3 decades ago to counter a long-term decline in profitability. More wealth had to be sucked from the poor by the rich. And in one form or another, neoliberalism was embraced by all Arab rulers. They privatised, globalised and financialised their economies. And the result, the Arab profitariat skinned the Arab proletariat and the masses seethed. We can draw parallels with the impact of climate change on our planet's geology. Neoliberalism set one tectonic plate, the Arab elite, grinding far more harshly over another, the Arab street. A huge amount of frictional energy built up, looking for release. Protest strikes and other foreshocks became more frequent. In December 2010, a Tunisian street vendor, Mohamed Bouazizi, set himself alight in protest at official harassment. This random jolt triggered a megaquake under the Arab world and unleashed a social tsunami. So far, the tsunami has swept across North Africa, the Middle East, the Levant and Southern Africa. 28 days of demonstration toppled Tunisia's tyrant in January, one down. 18 days of protest toppled Egypt's autocrat in February, 2 down. Today, Libya's locked in civil war. Major mobilisations have rocked Bahrain, Djibouti, Jordan, Oman, Syria and Yemen, and lesser protests have disturbed elites in 15 to 20, maybe more other countries. And there's been big rallies in Gaza in the West Bank that have demanded that Fatah and Hamas unite to resist Israeli occupation. The breadth of the protests, both geographically and socially, is absolutely stunning. And mostly there's been an impressive unity of will. Down with the dictator, down with his regime, bring in democracy. After Tunisia and Egypt, more tyrants began using extreme force to beat back popular movements. State thugs have killed, jailed and tortured untold thousands of Democrats in Libya, Bahrain, Yemen, Syria, Djibouti, Iran and elsewhere. Will state violence slow or stop the protest movement? What forms of resistance to regime brutality will be thrown up? Will the uprisings morph from regime change to social change? Now those are questions which cannot yet be fully answered and which only time will really tell. However, despite being early days, it does seem reasonable to draw these 6 conclusions. Conclusion number 1. The Arab enforcers of neoliberalism have been hit hard by the democracy protests. In consequence, it will become much more difficult for Arab states to continue hardline neoliberal policies. Maybe there will be open challenges to the law of profit, such as campaigns for welfare benefits, free healthcare, public education, minimum pay and speculation taxes. Conclusion number 2. Washington's response to the popular mobilisations has been disjointed and uncertain. It's a far, far cry from when US dictates shaped the Arab world. While the US state remains a malignant force in the region, its Arab empire of just a few years ago is decomposing. Maybe Libya's rebels have read the signs right, demanding foreign airstrikes and armaments in the belief that Washington lacks the power to turn them into imperial capture. Conclusion number 3. The intercontinental scope of the revolutionary wave has been an inspiration around the planet. Many more people now won't think it's silly to imagine a global uprising. Maybe an important impulse has been given to the campaign for a broad socialist international. Conclusion number 4. The popular unity against Arab dictators linked into a general impatience with factionalism, particularly among the youth driving the uprisings. This experience will make it harder for Arab states to employ traditional divide and rule tactics. Maybe the sectarianism that has dogged the political left will lose its potency in the Arab world, and maybe even beyond. Conclusion number 5, the social media employed in the uprisings, like Facebook, YouTube and Twitter, gave an immediacy and interconnectivity that was historically unique. It allowed the popular will to swiftly flow into popular organisation in a more decentralised way than ever before. Maybe the central media will provide the essential tools for broad left organisation that were lacking before now. And the last conclusion, while nobody can predict the future of the revolution, the Arab world has already been shifted onto another axis. The legitimacy of dictators has been collapsed by popular movements for democracy. Once stripped of legitimacy, even well-guarded regimes stand naked, and some of their guards start sympathising with the opposition. Maybe reliance on state force will rebound against dictators, repressing popular frustrations until they find release in an unstoppable eruption of revolutionary energy. On surface appearances, the Arab Revolution is unrelated to the Japanese disaster. Once examined from a whole-of-system perspective, however, parallels between these events can be seen. These parallels link directly into capitalism's law of profit. In pursuit of profits, Arab dictators imposed neoliberalism, thus escalating social tensions to bursting point. The same addiction to profit influenced the insanely dangerous siting of Fukushima nuclear plant. And geologists are discovering how earthquakes can be triggered by climate change, which in turn is spurred by the fossil fuels on which capitalism is hooked for reasons of profitability. So the law of profit is provoking upheavals in geology and climate, as well as society. Humanity's life support system, an amalgam of nature and civilization, can no longer reproduce itself properly. The world system is heading towards collapse. Shaping the system's collapse trajectory are 5 terminal crises. Crisis number 1, profitability. Financialisation forms the core of the neoliberal crusade to restore profitability. International financial transactions have soared to 60, that's 60 times the level of global gross domestic product. Increasingly, money creates money without also producing real commodities. The great financial crash of 2008 was cured, in inverted commas, by the transfer of private debt to states. As a result, sovereign bankruptcies that trigger worse crashes are looking very likely. Everything the system is doing to restore profitability is destabilising the system. Crisis number 2 is ecology. Rather than agreeing to reduce greenhouse gases, capitalist powers are promoting an emissions market. Looking to profit from the pollution that would destroy life on Earth indicates a system that is institutionally insane. And the emerging link between climate change and upheavals in our planet's crust, earthquakes and eruptions, is grim evidence of the system's death spiral. Yet climate change is just one of a raft of ecological hazards flowing from capitalism's war on nature. We also face alarming threats to forests, species, oceans, rivers, farmland, atmosphere and more. Crisis number 3 is resources. The Earth's resources are being consumed by capitalism at a mad rate. In the 21st century, we face not just peak oil, but peak everything, including strategic minerals, fresh water, and recoverable coal, natural gas, and uranium ore. Yet renewable energy cannot be prioritised because it would reduce profitability across the world economy. Consequently, A looming energy crunch threatens every cog of civilization. Crisis number 4 is imperialism. In each phase of capitalism's 500-year history, one power has gained such relative economic and military superiority over rival nations that it became the world hegemon at every one of those phases. Each successive hegemon kept enough order in the competitive world of capitalism for profits to be made. Over recent times, America, the 20th century's hegemon, has been in decline. Yet China, the rising power, has no possibility of securing the sort of superiority over other powerful states that the US enjoyed at its hegemonic peak. The world's imperial throne will soon be empty forever. Capitalism will lack a hegemon able to order system-level responses to the terminal crises tipping the world system towards collapse. And the last crisis, legitimacy. Slavery, feudalism, and other past civilizations fell victim to a tangle of unsolvable crises. These societies started to collapse into ruin, sparking revolts by frightened citizens no longer frozen by a belief in their system's legitimacy. Out of the chaos and conflict emerged a new type of civilization more in tune with the dynamics of the time. World capitalism now faces a similar fate. The Arab Revolution is strong evidence of a legitimacy crisis tailing the crises of profitability, ecology, resources, and imperialism. The onrush of system collapse carries the gravest of dangers, obviously. We should all be seriously scared. Yet early collapse will also help us get out of the mess in the best shape possible. And that's because if capitalism were to hang on for another half century or beyond, it's probable that civilization will be wrecked by the combined impact of economic disintegration, ecological catastrophe, resource scarcity, and imperial wars. And that would mean the dieback of most of humanity. It's when systems are collapsing that humans gain the most scope for our free will. No longer is our free will overruled by a system in control which enjoys popular legitimacy. As we journey through the end time of capitalism, people with the will to act decisively should be able to shape outcomes to an extent not seen since the collapse of feudalism. And that's 500 years ago. That might be good, that might be bad. It will depend on who does what and why. Key to a good outcome is educating people around the globe about capitalism's looming collapse. That will help to build united actions for a humanistic and ecological alternative. Accordingly, before the end of 2011, we plan to launch an international website called Terminal 5, an obvious reference to the world system's 5 terminal crises. So that's where I want to end my presentation, just with an invitation to people here. If you would like to, or think that you might like to get involved with our up-and-coming website Terminal 5, now's the time to say so and get in on the ground level. You can contact myself or Daphne or Pt2 or Vaughan, and we'll take it from there. Thank you very much.